In the early adventures of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a Christmas story emerged that uniquely redefined Michelangelo. I promise this has nothing to do with that infamous Christmas special. Today I'll cover this story, its sequel, and its adaptation into the 2003 cartoon. This is a video about the story titled The Christmas Aliens. The original version of this story was published in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Michaelangelo Micro-series by Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, and Steve Levine for the holiday season of 1985. The special was published right in the middle of an ongoing saga between issues 5 and 6. According to the creators, they came up with the idea for this story, and given that it was a Christmas story, they couldn't wait for the ongoing saga to end, as it wouldn't have made much sense in the middle of the summer. So it's commonly accepted that this story occurs right after the Turtles return from space. The story opened on Christmas Eve at Central Park, where Mikey was enjoying the snow. Mikey was covered in winter clothes, allowing him to interact with some kids and play with a sled. Out of nowhere, a stray cat surprised him, and Michelangelo placed it inside his jacket to protect it from the cold. Considering his disguise was working, Mikey decided to go shopping for gifts. After all, no one would notice him in the middle of the holiday shopping crowds. His initiative to buy gifts got sidetracked once he passed a toy shop where he decided to come in and play. Up to this point, Michelangelo was being redefined. You must consider that the 4 turtle personalities weren't so defined in the early issues. Raphael and Donatello quickly took on their classic personalities, but it took longer for Mikey to become unique. And in this issue, it was all in plain sight. He was having fun with some kids and enjoying the Christmas spirit and colorful lights. Not only that, he also took care of a stray cat, demonstrating he had compassion. Compared to his brothers, Mikey was developing a more innocent take on life. Inside the toy shop, we learned that the latest toy craze was the Little Orphan Aliens. Mikey started playing with the toys in the aisles, and during his playtime, he came up with a name for the cat, Clunk. But playing with the cat, Mikey scared him, and Clunk escaped into an alley. When Mikey went out to find him, he witnessed a robbery of a shipment of Little Orphan Aliens with the Brown Street Children's Home as its destination. Stealing dolls from kids on Christmas is a despicable thing. But these dolls went for $50 to collectors, so the criminals were expecting this crime to pay well. But the criminals noticed Mikey, and a chase ensued. With Clunk included, Michelangelo attached himself to the back of the truck and opened it. He left Clunk protected inside before engaging in a fight against the criminals. Unfortunately, at some point, the driver left Mikey behind. It was too late to abandon the mission now, as he not only had to rescue that shipment, but he also had to rescue Clunk. Still, we're talking about a Ninja Turtle here, so Mikey eventually took control of the truck, kicked the driver out, and found himself driving it. However, by this point, the police were aware of the stolen shipment and started chasing the truck. The police had an extra motivation to capture the truck. They could get their hands on some of those dolls for their kids. Mikey drove through the police and eventually found a hiding place for it. But leaving the truck to be found by the police wasn't a good idea anymore, as the dolls would get impounded as evidence, and those kids at the children's home wouldn't get their Christmas gifts. Mikey realized he had to deliver the presents himself, but he couldn't do that with the truck. He needed helpers. He went back to April's apartment and asked the guys for help. They moved all the merch away from the truck using April's van. Dressed as Santa and some elves, they delivered the presents to some very happy children. Going back to the matter of characterization, in the Mirage comics, there was no way of distinguishing the turtles unless they held their weapons. But when we see all the turtles at April's apartment, we can clearly tell them from each other. Raphael was weightlifting, Donnie was building a toy robot, and Leo, perhaps a little less defined then, was reading a TV guide. 23 years later, there was a somewhat sequel to this story in the pages of Tales of the TMNT Volume 2, number 53, in the story titled Alien Invaders by Jim Lawson and Eric Talbot, although this story was more about the Little Orphan Aliens. It seems like the Turtles kept one of these dolls and gave one to Shadow. So one day at the Joneses farmhouse in Northampton, a plumber and his assistant were fixing the water pressure in the house. The plumber, Paul, sent his assistant, Brian, to check out the faucet from the bathroom upstairs. When Brian checked the bathroom, he saw a Little Orphan Alien in Shadow's room. He stepped in and realized it was the one known as Thrunknor. On their way back, Brian asked Paul about the Joneses, trying to gather information about when they wouldn't be home. Brian happened to be a collector, and this Thrunknor was hard to find. One in mint condition like the one Shadow had was worth $2,700 that he didn't have. And he couldn't offer Shadow to buy it from her because she could say no, and they would suspect him if the doll mysteriously disappeared. Brian explained to his friend Lenny that this Thrunknor had a bad reputation, as some kids were hit by cars or bitten by dogs while playing with it. The media went nuts at the time, and the entire toy line failed because of it. Later, Brian received the visit of Thrunknor in his sleep, telling him that the girl didn't deserve him and he should really go for it. Brian and Lenny waited until Casey and Shadow went for a walk. Once away, Brian took a ladder, climbed to Shadow's room, and took the doll. However, when he climbed down, he noticed that Lenny was nowhere to be found, and all he could see were some very familiar turtle tracks in the snow. Brian looked up and saw 4 alien-looking creatures on the barn's roof. Terrified, he dropped the doll and ran away. The turtles then went inside the barn with their disguises and started scaring Lenny with the unlubricated anal probes. They intentionally let Lenny escape. On their way out, they crossed paths with Casey and Shadow, who simply assumed that this time of the year made people go crazy like that. But this sequel was probably influenced by the TV adaptation of The Christmas Aliens 4 years earlier. The adaptation was written by Michael Ryan and had pretty much the same plot, albeit interjected with the rest of the cast and guests preparing dinner and setting up a Christmas tree. The criminals in this version were purple dragons, and the action was simplified to have fewer twists and turns. Among the Turtles' dinner guests were Angel, Silver Sentry, Miyamoto Usagi, Murakami Jinosuke, the daimyo of the Battle Nexus, the Professor, and 2 homeless men. However, a crucial aspect of Mikey's decision-making process was omitted, which I believe was a significant oversight. They should have shown Mikey's thought process for not leaving the truck to the police so that the children could get their Christmas presents. Having that would have justified Mikey's actions in the end. Turtle fans have plenty to thank this story about. Not only did it redefine Michelangelo, but it also introduced Clunk as Mikey's pet. Clunk lived many years with the Turtles, which led to another very insightful Michelangelo and Clunk story, The Path, which I already covered on this channel. You should check it out. And that's all for today. Happy holidays to all, and thanks for watching.